Stan Markuze, welcome to Built to Sell Radio.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, tell me about Joyride Auto. How did this company come about?
So the story of Joyride Auto actually started many, many years before we founded the company. So I was in grad school. I was looking for a summer internship, and I interned for a company that was founded by my co-founder of Joyride. Interned there for a summer, stayed in touch with my co-founder, and then many, many years later, he gave me a call and had the idea to create an auction for impounded vehicles, and that was the beginning of Joyride Autos.
Auction for impounded vehicles. So I'm trying to think of why a car would become impounded. Like, are we talking about those cars that get sort of on the side of the road that look like someone's abandoned and like it's there for like 3 months and somebody comes and picks it up? Is that an impounded auto, or am I getting that wrong?
Yeah, that's right. Cars get impounded for a number of different reasons. So, for example, illegal parking, right? So you get too many tickets, your car can get towed. You know, the car's involved in a collision and gets towed. The car's involved in committing a crime, it gets towed. And so all these reasons, the car gets towed to a centralized facility, usually run by the city or a contractor who works for the city. So the car sits in impound. The owner of the vehicle gets notified that the impound has your vehicle, right? And you have to come and pick it up, and you have to pay the towing fee and the storage fee. And a large number of those vehicles, so in some areas it's around 20%, they don't get picked up. And so
no way, that's hilarious. Okay, so you call the company, you call the guy like, hey, you got to come down, pay your parking tickets and pick up your car. And like 20% of the time, they just basically abandon the car outright.
That's right. I mean, sometimes the cars are wrecked. Sometimes they're low value. Sometimes the people have like moved out of the city, or they just don't want to pay the money. And so they just leave the cars there.
How would they have unloaded all this like old metal before you guys showed up? Like, what was the old model?
Yeah, so I'm very familiar with the old model. So in San Francisco, where I live, there used to be an auction every other Wednesday at 10 a.m. in kind of an industrial part of the city. And folks from all around the Bay Area would go there and bid live on the vehicles, right? So there would be like a warehouse that has 100 to 200 vehicles, and you would get to inspect them for an hour before the auction, and you could just place a live bid.
I'm seeing these guys with like chewing on cigars with like a newspaper under their arm, and they're like kind of like with a clipboard, and they're saying, "Yeah, give me the Ford Taurus. I'll take the F-150."
Yeah, it's not far from the truth.
That's hilarious. And so you guys rock up and say, okay, let's digitize this business. Let's like get all this inventory on a marketplace where people can bid on it in real time.
That's exactly right. So if you can imagine, like, all right, so 10 a.m. on a Wednesday, not a lot of people can physically join that auction in person, right? Like most people are at work. And so digitizing that auction, first of all, really expands the universe of potential bidders who would have access to those vehicles.
For sure.
Right. And then when COVID hit, gatherings above a certain number of people were prohibited. So that created an extra point of friction where these impound facilities, which by the way are very, very space constrained, they would have nowhere to put these vehicles, nowhere to put the new vehicles that they were towing. And so they were kind of desperate to keep things moving so they could free up the space.
It's one of those things where I'm like, I can't believe this didn't exist before you guys came along. It's like one of those aha moments. I'm like, this didn't exist. It's incredible. So what was your business model? I mean, did you take a cut of every car you moved, or what was the economics?
Yeah, so the business model was it was fairly straightforward, right? So if you've ever been in an auction, typically you'll bid on something, and if you win it, you'll pay an auction fee on top of whatever you bid, right? So in our case, the average vehicle price was about $1,000, right? It would, depending on the city and depending on the time of year, a bunch of different factors, it would fluctuate, but it was generally around $1,000 average sale price. And we would charge a 15% buyer's fee on top of the $1,000 auction fee, right? So it was somewhat of a SaaS model, right? Because we had kind of long-term agreements with the towing facilities with the sellers. And so every week or 2 weeks or every month, depending on the facility, we would have an auction. You would auction off roughly the same number of vehicles, and you would charge that 15% fee on top of every single vehicle, paid by the bidder.
Okay, and did the sellers also pay for access to the platform?
The sellers did not, no.
Okay, so it's free to the sellers.
Yes.
The buyers paid a commission effectively or a buyer's fee on top of whatever they paid.
That's right. And actually, the sellers sort of got paid for using the platform because if you think about, okay, well, if you have a live auction at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday, you're going to get far fewer people participating in a live auction than you will if you could have basically like an unlimited number of people bidding on that vehicle digitally from a much larger like geographical area.
And who are the bidders for these cars? Like, who would have the courage to buy some broken down, you know, car that had been impounded?
Well, these cars, I mean, they're always going to sell at a discount to like what you would pay if you bought them
Of
from
course.
a car
Yeah.
lot or Craigslist or anything like that. But there are a lot of people who their business is fixing and flipping cars, or and they just enjoy projects. So this is the way we used to think about it, right? So the best vehicles, there would be dealers bidding on them, right? And a lot of these vehicles are like, um, you know, 2, 3 years old,
Really?
not no major damage. So they'd bid on these vehicles. They would maybe refurbish them a little bit and sell them. Then you have kind of like your driveway dealer who are buying lower value vehicles that aren't too messed up, right? So again,
Yeah.
buy them, fix them, sell them on Craigslist. Then you would have dismantlers buying vehicles that were in like major collisions, and then at the very bottom you would have uh, uh, scrap metal companies, right? So, for example, people who are just buying them for the steel and the aluminum, right? So, if a car was like in a fire or something like that, that would go straight to one of these scrap yards. So you would have like very specific demographics of people bidding on the vehicles depending on what their business model was, so to speak.
Hey, it's John. Look, if you're building to sell, I want to let you know about a resource you may find helpful. It's called the Value Builder Score, and it will evaluate your company in the same way that acquirers will look at your business. It'll give you a score on the 8 factors that drive the value of your company. You'll also get an estimate of value and things you could do to improve that value over time, whether you want to sell now or in a decade from now. Knowing how the movie ends, I think, puts you in the catbird's seat, gives you all kinds of negotiating leverage. So it's available exclusively through a value builder advisor. So talk to your advisor. If you don't have one yet, you can go to valuebuilder.com/score. Let us know what industry you're in, and we will connect you with an advisor who specializes in companies like yours. Just go to valuebuilder.com/score. This is so cool. I find this business such a fascinating business. How did you guys split up the equity? It was you, John, and another founder. How did you guys go on the equity?
Yeah, so basically, John was the CEO of the company, and he was the one who came up with the idea and the financing for Joyride. So he had a disproportionately large piece of equity, which he deserved because he financed the business. He kind of put the team together, and then there were 3 of us, and myself and the other co-founder had smaller parts of the equity.
And so you guys, the 3 of you, built this company up. Did you take a salary, or were you just basically getting paid based on the upside of your equity?
We took a salary, and the great thing about this business is that it kind of cash flowed from the beginning, right? So again, the CEO John had some relationships which allowed us to get into 3 very large markets and run their weekly or biweekly auctions, right? So essentially, we were making money very very quickly, and so we could afford to have salaries. And our
How
team
did
was
the
also
cash?
very lean as well.
Okay, so how did the cash move? So um, the seller, the city of San Francisco, as an example,
Yes,
would would list the car. You're not taking possession of the car; they're just simply listing it, right? So you're not having to outlay cash to buy it from the city of San Francisco. They're just listing it. Then
right.
there's the transaction, and you take a cut off the transaction. And so the cash, how did the cash move? Did the buyer have to upload like their credit card when they actually purchased the unit, or do they give
Yeah,
them terms? Or
yeah. So basically, the way that it worked would be I register as a buyer, right, and I put in a credit card for the ability to bid. And a major issue that we had in the beginning was people bidding and then not actually honoring their bids, right? So you would have someone who won like 10 cars and then decided they wanted 1 or 2 or maybe none of them.
sure,
And
yeah,
so the kind of like the terminal state of that was that you put in your credit card, and our system would charge you as soon as you won a vehicle. our system would charge you $150 or $100, right? And so the way that the cash moved is, okay, let's say I win a car for $1,000, right, through Joyride. Well, my card would immediately get charged the 15% buyer's fee, right? So I'd get charged $150. And then when I picked up the car from the towing facility, then I would pay the $1,000 that of the actual vehicle sale price, right? So effectively, like, we didn't really have to, claw back any money from the sellers. We didn't have to pay the sellers anything. All we had to do was collect that buyer's premium up front and make sure that the buyers actually picked up the vehicles from the facilities.
Nice. And it's basically a cash flow positive model. Did you guys have competitors? Like, were other people knocking on the doors of the city of San Francisco and the city of like Austin?
We had one competitor at the time who was kind of a regional player, maybe had like 3 or 4 smaller impound facilities. And they at some point they talked about, well, maybe you guys can buy us, but I don't think we had any specific competitors that were like laser focused on the impound vehicle space, right? We did have people would use like generic auction platforms, right? That weren't specifically intended for
Craigslist or
and some other ones out there, but like we were the only ones that were of scale and really focused on this market.
One of the challenges with a marketplace, and we've done lots of interviews with people who do marketplaces, is that you've got to get demand on both seller and buyer, right? So it sounds like you guys locked up cities of San Francisco and other big cities. So you had lots of sellers of the units. How did you go about acquiring buyers, like getting the word out to, the types of people that you listed earlier as terms of that would want to buy these cars?
Yeah, so in a marketplace business, there's always one of them that's harder to get than the other.
Yeah, for sure.
And for us, luckily, because we had John Wicker, he was able to kind of get that initial supply for us, right? And on the demand side of things, well, when you're selling something below market, there are like a lot of people who like a deal or a project or the opportunity to like flip something and make a little profit on top of it. But the way that we initially got our demand is a pretty good story. So, I had a friend who had a kind of like a business process outsourcing office in the Dominican Republic. And so I called my friend and I said, hey, we need somebody to like basically reach out to so we had a list of the bidders who would physically go into the auction and bid, right? Like we got the list from the auctions and then we needed somebody to call every single bidder and get them switched over from the physical auction to the digital platform, right? And so we hired this guy in the Dominican Republic, and we gave him a list of folks to call, and kind of like a Ring Central type of VoIP system. And he called every single bidder and kind of got him registered for the system, got him signed up. And so that's initially how we got the demand side of the business, right? So the supply side we had from John Wicker, and then the demand side we basically just got the list from every single towing facility, and we called them on the phone. And
I can imagine those phone calls being like, "You want me to sign up for the interwebs?" Like,
exactly.
Like, was it these are pretty old school folks, right? Like these are, I'm imagining like very analog, not super digital. I mean, that must have been hard.
You always have a combination, but you're absolutely right. Like a lot of these folks some of them don't even have a desktop computer, right? So we're like, but everyone's got a smartphone of some sort, right? So we're like, we made our platform mobile optimized so they could use any phone, Android, iPhone. But you're right. Like there's definitely, there was some attrition of people who just like probably could never wrap their mind around bidding on a website. So yeah,
I want to touch and feel the car. Yeah,
exactly.
Totally get it. Got it. Okay, so when you got into this, John's a majority shareholder.
Right.
Were you like, did you guys talk about potential exit options? Was that something you sort of talked about when you first, became a shareholder?
That's a good question. I mean, we had the vision of growing the platform to be quite large to compete with like publicly traded vehicle auction platforms, of which there are several. Like there are a couple of large auction companies that that do that, and so our vision was to build a really huge business. And so we never really talked about concretely like, this is how much we want to sell it for. This is the buyer. This is when we're going to sell it. We just didn't really have those conversations for this one, just because we always had a big vision for it.
And what changed?
I think what changed was distribution, especially on the supply side. It's pretty hard to sign up new towers because a lot of these organizations are also kind of more traditional, more set in their ways, right? They like people showing up in person. Some of the people who show up in person to buy their cars are like their buddies, right? They've been selling cars to these folks for decades, right? And so distribution was just, and by distribution I just mean like signing up sellers to make it more clear. It was challenging. Like we were doing it, but it was we'd go to towers and say, you can make more money, you can sell your cars to more people, you can diversify your customer base. You don't have to have security to keep an eye on 100 people in your facility. We'd go to these people and they say, well, I've just been selling to the guy down the street for the last 20 years. And like, I like that. Right. And so distribution on the supply side was very high friction. And we coincidentally, we found someone who had a good solution for like a lot of synergy on the supply side, on the distribution side. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I want to explore that a little bit further. Where are you in terms of revenue at the time you decided to sell, or number of employees or revenue, whatever you want to share?
So the company was always very lean, but in terms of the revenue, it was in the low single digit millions.
Low single digit millions. Okay.
Yeah, per year.
So got it. Okay. And how many of you are, like, is it just the three of you running this thing? Do you have employees, or is it just the three founders?
Yeah, but I don't think that company ever had more than like 20 employees, including people who were overseas. Right. So it was always a very lean operation, including like the software developers who built the platform were overseas. John and David and I, who were the three founders, we were all in California. The CTO was in California, like the one managing the developers. And then we just had a handful of other people here. But customer support, kind of like, let's see, anything client facing was really, especially on the buyer side, like all that's like the customer support infrastructure, that was all overseas. That was in the Philippines.
So your low single digit millions, I mean, I'm assuming the profitability is largely negligible. Like if it's the three of you founders, like you've got to pay developers. Like I'm not imagining this to be a massive profit spigot.
It wasn't. I would say the value in the company was that, it was growing, and it was sort of like a SaaS style business, which is it's an appealing business model, right? So you could scale this to as many auctions as you wanted to with like very little marginal cost.
Right. Okay. Because you had the software that would work whether you had one seller
exactly,
or thousands. It would be.
Yeah, I mean, we had like these critical problems, like the problem that I mentioned with like deadbeat bidders, so to speak. Like once you've solved that for one auction, you've solved it for like 100 auctions potentially, right? And so the idea is like, all right, if you had a partner that could scale you out to 100 auctions, then that's like a very powerful like cash machine, right? As a business.
Yeah, for sure. But to be clear, you did not have, like when I think of SaaS revenue, it's like that kind of monthly, it's always the same amount. It's $99 a month. That's not the model. It was this commission.
Yeah, it's not the model, but the commission, it was similar because the average sale price of the vehicles would stay pretty similar month to month. The number of vehicles sold would stay pretty similar. And the cadence of the auctions, what I was also like, San Francisco was every 2 weeks. Some cities it was once a month. Some cities it was every week, depending on like, how they wanted to do things. And so once you do, number of cars times revenue per car times number of auctions per month, it would be very similar to like a SaaS style cash flow.
Yeah, your P&L probably looked a little bit like a SaaS company, even though it wasn't traditional.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk about what happened. You're kind of running into a bit of a roadblock getting more sellers signed up, and then you met a seller or someone that had access to these sellers. Tell me that story.
Yeah, so basically, my co-founder John, who was the CEO, he had previously sold a software company to a private equity firm, and his software company was the towing management. it was basically like a city would license this software to manage towing across all of their impound, the tow trucks, the customer support, the pickups, right? Like that's a very complex problem. The leaning of the vehicles, right? The lien is kind of like how much you owe on the vehicle. So John previously had a company that would manage that whole ecosystem for their impound, right? And John sold that company to a private equity firm, right? Which was operating that company at that time, and that company ended up actually that private equity firm ended up seeing the synergy between what they had bought from John previously and our company, and they were the ones who came to us and made us an offer. And
Oh, interesting. Because that's really interesting because the towing management software had all of the towing companies as customers. And so the private equity company, the immediate synergies there, they could literally start cross-selling your service, your auction service to those people that were using the towing management software.
yeah, and they had a bunch of other they were acquiring other pieces of that ecosystem, right? Like kind of an end-to-end solution for, you get a contract with a city, and then everything you can imagine regarding like towing and impound, like they were buying all those little solutions, right? They were buying the point solutions to make like a whole package, and this was part of that package.
And when did John sort of share with you and David that the company he sold his former company to could in fact itself acquire you guys? Like when did you become aware of that potential synergy?
Yeah, so of course, John, we were talking like all day, every day, pretty much, right? So we knew everything about his sale of his previous company to the private equity, um, but it was never really on our radar that they would come after Joyride, right? Um, and then I think the way that it got started was John met someone who worked for a different private equity fund who thought our business was interesting or something like that. And then that's how the whole conversation started, and that's why these guys ended up acquiring Joyride.
So if I'm getting it right, John, mentioned the conversation he had with private equity, this other private equity group, to his acquire this.
Something along those lines. But
and they're like, well, hold on a second, before you sell to them, why don't you talk to us?
Yeah, exactly. And so but it wasn't like a sales process, right? Like we didn't say, okay, we want to sell this thing and we're going to go to market and like start a bidding war among different acquirers, right? Like that never happened, right? And there was never a conversation about like, okay, now is the right time, like, because acquiring the sellers was hard, but we were doing it, right? Like we were slowly but surely rolling these guys up. And so but the benefit would be like, okay, well, if you could sell to someone who has scale and distribution for your product, like then you could sell that product into every relationship that the acquirer has, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I get the synergies immediately. And I'm curious to know, from a minority shareholder perspective, for you and Dave, what involvement you had in the negotiations. So John's obviously got this relationship with the private equity company. Did he share with you, their initial offer or how they approached the kind of, LOI, for example? Like how much exposure did you have to the process?
Yeah, I mean, John had dealt with these guys previously when he sold his first company, and in general, John's a very a good negotiator, right? And we know that, right? So we largely just trusted John. We were sort of aligned, right? Because we were all shareholders of the company. And so we really just trusted John to get the best deal for us. And that deal ended up being it was the quintessential private equity deal where there's like part cash, part stock with multiple earnouts. But John really did what he thought was best in optimizing that company to get the maximum possible value for the shareholders.
And so what did you guys get in the end?
So we got 7 times the annual revenue of the company.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And so that's the headline number. Now, was part of that at risk, as they say, in a kind of an earnout of some sort?
Yeah, there were four different like earnout like levels of earnout or tranches, and I think we hit three of the four tranches. Um, and then as I mentioned, there was each tranche had a certain percentage that was cash and a certain percentage that was equity in the like roll up company.
Got it. Okay, so the sort of headline number is 7 times, but that's not cash.
Right.
There's a. Can you share roughly what proportion was cash versus at risk in an earnout?
Yeah. So cash was a little less than half. When you kind of like each tranche had its own structure, but when you kind of average it out, it was a bit less than half was cash, and
Okay,
and the remainder was equity.
and the earnout targets were they just years, or were they different, like EBITDA versus revenue, or like how would the earnout
Yeah,
structure?
they were based on performance, um, and um, so as I mentioned, the first of the four was just kind of like you know the down payment that the acquirer made for the company, and then the next two were actually based on performance beyond that, and then there was a fourth one which was like kind of like a long shot one that didn't end up materializing.
Okay, got it, got it. And instead of cash associated with the earnouts, or pure cash, that if you hit one of the earnouts, you would get stock, if you will, in the acquiring company.
Yeah.
Okay. And and was that stock in any way liquid, or do you have to wait until the acquiring company sells its shares?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question. So it's not liquid, right? Because it's a private company. But if you think, the way I always think about it is, a private equity fund typically has a holding period of anywhere from 5 to 7 years, right? So my assumption was always that from the time they started building the platform, right, they started the roll up until it could be 5 to 7 years from that first like acquisition until the stock is actually, they'll probably sell it to another private equity. And then at that point, the acquiring private equity probably doesn't want to have a bunch of minority shareholders. So the expectation will be that at that point there will be an opportunity for liquidity to just kind of like finish the deal, so to speak.
And did you get, like you and Dave, the minority partners, did you have to roll all of your shares, or did you get some liquidity out of the kind of first
Yeah,
tranche,
everyone
if you will?
that's yeah. So everyone got liquidity in the same proportion, right? So
Okay.
it was always like X dollars, and the dollars were a little less than half, and Y shares, right?
Got
So
it.
everyone's
Okay.
in the same boat.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So you got kind of roughly half of your value up front in cash, and then the rest in shares that you at some point may
Right.
they might get liquid when they acquire cells. You mentioned before we hit record that that life is a under the purview of a private equity group was a little different than you'd hoped, or maybe a little bumpy. Like what was it like being owned by a private equity group relative
Yeah.
to just you and
Yes.
John?
So I never worked under the private equity group, although I spoke with them after or spoke with the new leadership after the acquisition. But yeah, I mean, I think the headline is that like especially when you're part of a roll up that sells into a private equity group, like you don't really control very much, right? And so you kind of if they hire a CEO for the holding company, um, your destiny is kind of in their hands. And the good news is that, most private equity firms are, the people who work there are very smart and experienced, and they want to maximize the value of the company. But it's very different from like being an entrepreneur, which like I'd say John and David and I were entrepreneurs, right? And so like um at that point you're like working for the person who either for the private equity or for the person who they've designated to like represent their interests.
And so, did you leave on your own accord? Did they say, "Hey, we don't need any more Stan"? Like, how did that all go down?
Yeah, I left before that. Yeah.
Got it, got it. And what about John?
John stuck around a bit, just because John was the CEO, and he had negotiated the deal. And also John, John's a very talented kind of like sales go-to-market person. And that's what the company needed at that time. So it made sense for him to stick around and kind of do the transition. And at the same time, continue to push on some of the deals to expand expand the company so we can meet the earnouts for the private equity.
Yeah, yeah. I'm, for a lot of our listeners, they are the founders of their company, and some of them will have given or sold a minority stake to their key employees. Maybe they're co-founders, like in your case, you and David. In other case, they might just be employees that have stock options or whatever. And I'd be curious, and I'm sure they'd be curious to know, what was it like for you as a minority shareholder going through this transaction? I'd be curious to know, like, were there things that surprised you or that disappointed you or that are unique to being sort of not in the room when the big deal gets negotiated? Does that make any sense at all?
That does make sense. And I would say the biggest, I guess and I can't say that anyone did anything right and wrong because I wasn't the one negotiating the deal. And I know for a fact that John was trying to get the best deal possible, right? Because like our, number one, he's a smart guy. Number two, our interests were aligned, right? So he was trying to do the best he could with whatever constraints he had at the time. But I guess like one point of feedback is I like simplicity, and any deal that happens, whether it's in my current company or I think I like to keep things simple. And the kind of like 4 tranche deal with the stock and the cash is maybe a little more complex than I would have liked, but I can't criticize anyone for that, right? Because maybe that was like the biggest opportunity to get to realize the best value from the company, right? And ultimately, I think the deal that John negotiated was actually pretty smart because I'm pretty confident that the EBITDA on the roll up of the company is going to command a higher multiple than the EBITDA on, or than what it would have been on our company, just because we didn't really have scale, and this huge roll up that the private equity is putting together is going to have scale. So it makes sense that those shares should bring, if the private equity makes money, then we should make money, right?
Yeah, there should be some, as the PE guys refer to as kind of multiple arbitrage. Like
exactly,
they bought you for X, but they hope to sell you for 2X or whatever on a multiple basis. That makes total sense. I'm always curious to know if people buy themselves a trophy. Was this your first sort of big financial win as an entrepreneur? Or like, I'd be curious to know if you sort of celebrated the win or?
That's a good question. Like, I'm definitely proud of what we've built. I think it's a cool business. Like, I think it's cool that it's still intact and it's operating basically the same way that we built it, right? So if you go to joyrideautos.com, it's getting rebranded, right? But it's still like basically the same thing that we created. So for me, like, I think that's cool. I think that's a win. Like, did it like change my life in a way that I was able to do something that I couldn't do previously? Not really. But it was, I'm proud of it. I'm proud that the company still exists. I still check it out every now and then, right? I still get the marketing emails, and I'm still in touch with John and David, who are my co-founders, because we went on that journey together. And beyond the fact that it's still around, I think, building a company and taking it to liquidity in the course of like 2 years, 2 and change is pretty impressive. Like, I think that's, I think John did a good job selling it when he saw that opportunity.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's incredible. And most people spend a decade or more building a business, and you guys, built it and flipped it in a couple of years, which is really, really impressive. And I do think there's something pretty cool about being able to kind of look at a company you started that you no longer own and just see that it continues to, it's kind of like giving birth to a child, right? Like whether they're 20 or 25, you can't control them anymore, but it is cool to see them go out in the world and forge their own identity and that you had, like you were part of the founding, team, and it wouldn't have happened without you. I think that's a cool feather in your cap. And now you've got something that's all yours. Tell me about Balance.
So Balance, my current company is called Balance Cash Management, and we just help companies earn market interest rates on their cash across all their banks and other accounts. So we connect to any bank and any account, and we automatically invest excess cash into U.S. Treasury-backed money market funds, essentially.
Is this kind of like a sweep account? I remember back in the day, they had these kind of sweep accounts where they sweep excess cash and put it into like a higher performing treasury T-bill or something to that effect. Is it kind of like that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So basically, once you've identified that, like, let's say you have an account that has $500,000 in it, right? But you know that for whatever business you have tied to that account. By the way, it's only for businesses, okay? Whatever business you have tied to that account, let's say you only need like $200,000 at any given time to meet your payroll and your rent and things like that. So you have an extra 300 grand sitting in that account. So you would just go into our platform, connect that bank. You would say, my target balance for my deposit account is 200,000. And then everything in excess would be moved into Vanguard or Invesco money market funds. And it would earn interest there during the time that you're not using it. And then if you do need that extra cash at any moment, you could quickly bring it back into your deposit account and spend it as you need.
That's so cool. Again, it kind of like, I'm going, does this not exist already? This is a very cool business. Where can people learn about Balance? Is there a URL?
Yeah, just go to balancecash.io. And you can also send me an email. I'll give you my work email address, which is stan@balancecash.io. And so you can contact me directly, and me or someone on my team will walk you through the software.
That's really cool. And in terms of social, are you a LinkedIn guy, or what's your best place?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm the only Stan Markuze on LinkedIn, so I'm easy to find. And if you just Google like Stan Markuze, LinkedIn, Balance Cash, you'll find me there as well.
You'll pop right up, and we'll put Stan, your contact information, Joyride, and then Balance all in the show notes at builttosell.com. Stan, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for your time. This has been great.